Okay, I'm going to do a kind of a two-part series. A friend of mine is having problems with, he's not having problems, but he's just trying to learn a quicker way of doing his backgrounds, his image. And so what I've done is I've taken the image he was using. This gives him a good example. And it really has to do with the background. Now the background, we don't see any marks in it or anything else like that, but I don't want to have to muck around with that image. I want to get it out, get it done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take old-fashioned carbon paper. Okay? Old-fashioned carbon paper, you get it in any office supply. At least I think you can anymore. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to come in, and I'm using a Bic pen. I'm not using anything special. I'm going to put a border around it. Okay. And all I'm trying to do is just create a drawn border. Okay, when you transfer on the top, it's going to transfer to the canvas or to the paper. And I transfer the same way. Let me grab my glasses here, because I'm blind as a bat half the time. Okay, now, what I'm going to do with this bird is I'm going to try to get as much information down as possible. Information being anything I see for this bird. And this is really a pixelized image. So I'm going to okay. That's part of that stump. So all I'm just going to do is I'm just going to transfer it down. And that's all I'm going to do. Now the one thing I asked him to do was he's going to do this with one brush, because if you do this with a small brush, you're going to be too tied up in detail. And if your object of the game is to learn how to use the medium, you want to use a large enough brush, and you want to make sure that you get as much information as down. But that one brush you're going to use until you can absolutely make this happen using that one brush. And I usually like a 3/4 inch flat wash brush or 1 inch flat wash brush, which means it's this wide. It's for this picture. Now, if you already know how to mix paint or use a brush, then this is probably not even necessary to do. Okay, and then I just check on my drawing. See what I mean? Okay. So it's not that big of an issue. And you leave it taped on. You don't pull it off. And all I'm doing is I'm just transferring down all the information I have. And you can kind of see I've got I'm going to have more information here on my reference than I do my transfer. And this is a way of making sure that you get all you need. A lot of times people, they don't do this and they wind up missing a few things. And then one last thing I do that I don't know if it's necessary, but well, it is kind of necessary, because if you don't do it, you wind up washing out your sketch. I'll go back over this sketch with a pencil, with a big pencil, and I want as much detail on there as possible, even light shadows, everything, because you're gonna, like I said, you can't put those things in when you're all finished. And since this is kind of a degraded image, I don't know, kind of, you know, because I got in here and you can kind of see the bird. So if I sit back, if I'm like this, I'm going to get lost with the pixelization of that bird. But if I sit back here from a distance, I'm able to see this. So I'll probably paint this up to this, you know, being this far away from it. Okay, now I'm going to put in this log. And when I'm going to come in here and do it, I'm just going to do the same thing. I want as much detail in there as possible. And if you don't see it, don't put it in. Okay, if you don't see it here, do not put it in. Don't make anything up. Because remember, if you haven't done this before, you don't want to have anything, like if I do in here and say, I paint this, but I add a whole bunch of shadows here for no reason, okay, on the light part. That's not in the photograph, but our imagination plays tricks with this. So it says, this is the bird, I got to put all the, I got to make it, I got to do all the wing. Got to have the wings in there. Okay, do you though? You don't have to have all the wing in there. There we go. And as I'm doing this part, I'm also looking over my bird. And just kind of like checking it out. Because believe it or not, this is probably a 10 minute painting. Okay, you don't want to put a whole lot, and the reason why that is because we're going to be using one brush very carefully doing the whole thing, but we're not going to use a small brush. Now if like I said, if you have done this before and you're used to using brushes, you know how to load a brush, then it's not even an issue. But again, I always like having as much detail here as possible. Okay. Okay. These little ridges here. Now you also want to think of value. Now if I put this, if I make this, okay, here's white. There's a value here. If I put that in there like that, it's going to flatten the image out. So you're working with a little bit of, you're leaving a lot of white. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5 values in this only. So you don't want to make it more complicated than what it is. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and look. And that is a stick that's coming up. It is not his leg. There's one leg and the other leg's behind the log. And I'm going to leave that in. Okay. Come in here and try to keep this. In fact, I know he's actually, my friend has actually been doing a little bit of painting, so I'm going to skip the large brush. Typically I'd have him do a 3/4 inch flat wash brush so he can learn how to handle the brush, the techniques and everything else like that. But I think we're good. So okay, I'm going to put you on pause. Okay, I'm back. I got it all set up. Okay, so this is the brush I was telling him to use. This is a 1 inch. This is also synthetic. I'm not sure who this is made by. All I know it's a synthetic. So synthetics are just going to hold the same amount of paint, but we can't get a hold of Klinsky Red Sables anymore, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. Okay, and I'm also going to be using these Boxhoon number 8, and I've used all these brushes before. So I now have my transfer done. I'm going to pull that off. But before I do anything, I'm going to come in here, my glasses on real quick. I'm just going to go over my transfer here. And pencil. Because a lot of times when you're using graphite paper, it comes off. Okay, and on top of that I can refine the sketch. And I'm only going to be using one color on this. Now I was going to do it with the large brush, but I figured he's got a pretty good handle on loading a brush and pushing the watercolor around. And if he doesn't, he'll always contact me, tell me he hasn't been able to do that. So I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to come in here, I'm looking here. Now even here, what I'm going to be doing, you kind of see me, I'm looking at my reference even when I'm doing this, even though I got these lines here. This helps me define, there we go. See like that right there? I can take out. Even though we both know again, whenever I'm doing this, I'm also looking at values come in here and do this. Now a lot of times I'll oversize my paper. And the reason why is because I can use this. This paper is the same as that paper. So if I make a color swatch out here, I know it's going to work here. It'll work with my values, it'll work with everything. Ah, see? There we go. Come in here and maybe on another video what I'll do is show you after I'm done with some of these and they've got schmutz on them and stuff like that. I'll show you how I take the schmutz off the paper. And you have to keep in mind you got about 30 seconds of work time whenever you're doing a watercolor, okay? About 30 seconds. So once you're done, now I see about two values in my log. Okay. Okay. Here we go, we're almost got her. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to border this off. Okay, I need to see some here. Okay, I'm going to bring this down there. So I'm going to leave this top part white, and kind of where this comes down, I'll do a second value down here, and then I'll finish this off with the bird. But the first thing I'm going to do is do the background. I'm just going to drop in that wash, and that was his biggest problem with that, because he was putting textures in the background to try to represent the cloud and the skies and everything else. So I'm going to show you an easy way of doing that. And a lot of this, you have to remember, you're figuring out yourself, all sorts of things. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to say I got that done. Nothing really fancy, masking tape. Now they make all these materials like Frisket and mask and stuff like that, but I'm a thorough believer that if you're going to do this, make the brush do the work. Okay. There we go. Now, typically, okay, now what I want to do is I'm going to do this all in, let me see, what is that? I'm going to do this all in raw umber. Okay, and I usually have about 2 tablespoons of water here. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to have this color mixed in with that. So I'm going to grab myself another container. I'll use my pig cup. How about that? Okay. The second deal of water is clean water. So once I'm done with this, because if I put this on, you can see it's got water there. Okay, so I'm going to clean this off. See this? And I got clean water. So what I'm going to do is, hold on a second, I want to cut that. There you go. I want to be able to turn this, okay, in different directions. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to clean that off here, and I've got enough color here to do a lot with. Okay, so When I say that, see, that's going to give me a nice wash effect out here. But I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this. And like I said, you got about 30 seconds of work time. So once I have that kind of doused in water, add a little more here. Take this off. I'm going to drop this up here, just like that. Now when you notice the color, what's the color doing? It's not... Okay. And whenever there's water, that's the only place that this will go. It will not run into the subject. And this is going to dry lighter than the canvas. Or wider than, yeah, wider than the, so I'm coming here. I might drop this in there like so. So it's like putting Frisket on. And what I'll do is I'm just going to let that dry because I don't want it to confuse anything else in there. So I'm going to have to stop the video. So the part 2, I'm going to come in here. Might even do a little bit of this. So you see that wash effect back there. And believe it or not, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to put that off. So this is going to be, if you look at the reference here, hold on, you don't see any textures back here. So I don't want to have any textures here. What I want to have is, you know, just this nice, clean, you know, if I want, I can kind of make this a vignette type thing. Put it in here like so. And that's all I'm going to do in the background. So anyway, guys, I'm going to continue with my other stuff. I'm going to let this completely dry. Once that's dry, we'll go on to the next step, okay? So I'll make a second video. So this is background transferring out and feeling comfortable with that. And that also leads you, so in trying to sketch these things out, because a lot of times people have problems sketching out, and you're just putting it down for the proportioning and the detail. That doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. It doesn't mean that you're cheating or anything. It just means this was a quick way. Your illustrators have been doing that for about 70 years. Fine artists have been doing it forever because they brought that method into the fine art world. So yeah, there we go. Okay, if you got any questions, let me know. So part 2, we'll work on the bird. Part 3, we'll do that and it'll be knocked out. Okay, anyway, Kevin out.